Okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing now so that we can see our panelists more clearly. Let me start with the first question. Could you tell us about one of your favorite memories from when you were a graduate ISE student here? I don't know who wants to start, but maybe someone volunteers, or I can pick myself.
The best memory? Maybe Kyle? You want to say first, Kyle?
I was going to say we could go by seniority, Ningji.
Yeah.
I'm just
I don't know we
joking.
have that, but yes, but there's a lot of good memories for me. I think I cannot really pick the best memory. I think, for example, there's a lot like weekends. We have like some parties like in the Erie Lake, right? So near went to the Niagara Fall, which I miss most here. Actually, I really like the fall a lot. And like the first time I actually know that my paper get accepted from the networks, that's also like a big memory for me. And also the graduation day. I remember like because COVID, I need to give the presentation online. Like there's a lot of people here, and that was like went smooth than I expected, and it was a little bit emotional because I was kind of like the end of my PhD journey. So yeah, those are my best memories if I just think about what happened in those 6 years, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm next in the line. Okay, so for me, I think mostly coming from India, I didn't really have a lot of chance to meet students from other countries and other backgrounds and cultures, right? For me, that was a big, most important thing because I like the cuisine and what situations are going on in their countries, people coming from China, from Iran, right? That was like beautiful memories to spend time with students from other countries. And yeah, definitely I miss Niagara Falls. I wouldn't say that I miss snow, but definitely Niagara Falls. One of the best memories I have was my friends throwing me a birthday party at Niagara Falls. So that was a great event to be at. But also like achieving other dreams, like when you come here as a student, you have a set journals where you want to publish. And when you achieve those dreams, that's a big thing which you don't really get as an undergrad student at other countries like India, and then getting job offers and other internship opportunities. Those are also like sweet memories that I have, which I achieved at UB. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
I would say for me, probably the most memorable thing during my time as a student at UB was probably the conferences. For many reasons, and I would say the conferences that I attended early on in my actually my undergraduate journey leading into my PhD journey, those conferences did a lot for me. First things first, obviously they allow you to disseminate your research for maybe the first time to a broad audience. But to be honest, that's not why I enjoyed conferences so much. It gave me an opportunity at that time in life to meet professors outside the classroom, both professors from UB ISE, but all over the nation, schools of management, obviously industrial engineering departments, but all over the place. And I got to learn about the fact that they are humans, right? Just like we all are as students, and they have struggles. They also have things they really enjoy doing outside of school. So I really enjoyed conferences because I was able to meet faculty in specific. And to be quite frank with all of you, that's one of the major reasons I joined this career path, was because I had so much inspiration and motivation from all those folks I met at conferences. And you can get that, of course, talking to faculty right there in UB ISE, but the more you kind of expand your horizons, in my opinion, the better it is. And of course, more opinions are always better. But yeah, so for me, the highlight and the biggest memories were the conferences early on.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. If it wasn't for conferences, I wouldn't have met you guys. So yeah, we have this event thanks to the conferences. So going to the next question, did you always know you were going to choose academia? If not, what were the main reasons you chose this path?
I can actually start off because that's kind of where I ended. So no, I did not always know I was going to go into academia. Absolutely 100% not. I have quite an interesting background. But long story short, I joined UB ISE as an undergrad, wanting to literally join industry as a practicing industrial engineer. And then, as you all can now see, my journey has changed paths to the academia side. And as I just mentioned, one of the big reasons for that was purely just by meeting faculty understanding what they do behind the scenes. And like I said, and like I'll highlight again, understanding that they are just simply humans. At the end of the day, they are just humans who worked really hard to get somewhere. And at the end of the day, I really like that because they helped me a lot in my journey, including Dr. Zhang, who's on the call now, but there's countless faculty right there in UB ISE who spent so much time with me, gave me so much time and attention when they really didn't need to because they have a lot of students to deal with. And like I said, that's what made me realize not only are they making me appreciate what I'm doing, they're making me realize that I want to do the same thing that they are doing, which is teach the next generation. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I can go next. Yeah, like coming from India, I never wanted to be a professor. I wanted to earn a lot of money by working at an industry. So that was my goal. So starting from second year, I did like 3 different summer internships. And after spending like 3 years, then that's when I realized like, no, industry is not something that I want to do. And my realization came generally with teaching. So I was like teaching courses with Dr. Zhang, and that's when I realized I like interacting with students. And I always liked research, but teaching was something that sparked my interest into academia. And some other things that I'd like about academia is freedom to choose what you would like to teach or what you would like to do for your research, which necessarily not the case in industry, and your ownership of work, whatever you are doing, it's your work. You can claim it to be your own, right? And the other stuff is work-life balance. For me, I don't know if that is true for Kyle or Ninji, but for me, I have a lot of balance. Like I get to do a lot of other activities, which I don't know if I would have a 9 to 5 routine in industry, I would have gotten time to do that. And I really hate these routine jobs, 9 to 5. I'd like to have more flexibility in the way I schedule my classes or meetings. And academia gives me that. So I'm more motivated, and whatever I do it with enthusiasm. And yeah, that's the reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the same. Like at the very beginning, I was thinking about become like this job, because I before I came to UB, I was like in industry back in China for 6 years. So after that, I feel like maybe I want to do a little bit something different. And then I didn't think I'm gonna go to academia, so I just choose as a master student to start with. So I think what really made me think academia is probably a good choice for me, a good career path for me is when I work with my advisor and also like go to conferences, many professors there. And I feel like many of them are actually really interested in this job in different aspects. Like some of them are interested in teaching part, some of them really interested in project they're working on, right? So it's like a very flexible career path. Like even though you're thinking all professors doing same thing, they're doing research, they're teaching, but actually everyone is focused a little bit different aspect. And I think this kind of flexibility is something actually attract me the most. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So I think as a PhD student or a graduate student in general, while you're working on your research, going to conferences and working with your advisors, you get an idea of what to expect in academia. But I want to know if there was anything different for you in academia from what you had expected before joining.
So I think I'll start this time. So yeah, I think definitely, right? So before I start this job, of course, I will have a lot of expectation, but I think one good thing for me is I have a comparison like with the job I had before. So eventually there's no perfect job, right? So there's all jobs where there's something you're not interested or you need to do, but maybe you're not like really like enjoy. But I think the good thing about like academia is like I still feel I have a big chunk of time doing things I like. So there's always like compromise. And I think if you ask Dr. Zhang, he might knows more about this, right? So there's always compromises. There are always things you need to choose from. But I think one thing for example, for me right now is I try to adjust to is how to write grants, right? That is something as a PhD student or as a postdoc, I didn't had a lot of experience in. So that's part I always need to like spend more time to learn new things. But I think, yeah, so it's still like good, like it's different expectation, but overall, I feel like the most part is what I enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, I can go next. Uh, for me, I think when I was a student, I used to think that being a professor is mostly you do research and teach. But now that I realized you also have to be a good manager because you are working with a lot of students and they come from different backgrounds. They have their own challenges. So you need to understand what challenges they are facing so that you can create these inclusive and equitable environment, right, for them to succeed in their research and teaching opportunities. So that was a challenge for me, so that I have to be patient, but at the same time I need to learn about what challenges they might face, something that I haven't done in as a PhD student, because I was mostly concerned about my success or my research, whatever I was doing. So that is still an ongoing learning process. Sometimes I'm not that patient, but then I have to go back and reflect on what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, and also learning from senior faculty. So that is something new. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I would say coming into this career, I knew it was relatively speaking, compared to other careers, it's a very autonomous job. Meaning you're given a lot of freedom and flexibility, as you've heard from actually everybody here. But I think the one thing I learned really early on is just how much autonomy you truly do have. At least I don't want to speak for Texas Tech and Cal Poly, but at least here at UB. And I make this joke to some of my students who are thinking about PhDs. Um, in all reality, I only need to talk to my boss once or twice a year, and that's when she's telling me what classes I am teaching. Other than that, I go about my life and I go about my job, and that's that. And at a high level, if you think about many other jobs in industry where I have worked in a previous life, um, at least in my job back then where I was a data scientist, I interacted with my manager and my team all the time, and I was tasked every single morning. Actually, we had stand-up meetings where we were all tasked and had things to do that day. Here in academia, at least with the way things are going from here now, it is much, much different. Every single day I come to work and I plan my days, I plan my weeks, I even plan my years. And to me, that is really, really exciting because you have, so for all of us on the call, we're all on tenure track, which means within the next however many 4 to 6 years, we're going to all go up for tenure. So that means we all have a huge goal, but that goal is pretty far off and we need to figure out how we're going to get there. That means we need to bring in mentors as needed. We need to bring in advisors as needed. But at the end of the day, it's up to us. And for me, personally, I really like that. It sounds probably weird to say I like that pressure, but I really like that pressure because I'm not waiting on anybody else. I'm not relying, well, I am relying on mentors, but I'm not relying on anybody else to get the job done. And at the end of the day, if anything fails, it's on me. So those are kind of some things that I knew coming in. I would have autonomy, but I didn't realize the level of autonomy that I would have. So yeah.
That was very interesting. So you mentioned a few challenges you faced, but like how also you're managing it. But I want to know like what's the main challenge and what is something that people can or students here can prepare for right now as graduate students?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. There's a many different ways to get to this career path, right? So, but I think as a PhD student, I still think maybe the most crucial thing is trying to finish the project at hand, right? So to do the best quality of the work. I think that is like the I think to get a faculty job, that's borderline. Like at these days, like market, if you have no good publication, it's difficult to start this, right? So maybe not many, but like the quality 1, 2, 3. And the other things like I think to explore, like the talk with the many faculty members in the department or even go to conferences, communicate with other professors. So because when you communicate, talk, kind of have conversation with different people in this job, then you have many different aspects. So for example, the previous question you ask, what is the difference, right? So maybe there's a different, actually the job is different from what you expected. So those information you can get from asking people, talking with people, so you have more realistic ideas. And the other things, I think maybe when you do the research, also think a little bit about how you position yourself, the research in today's job market. Like if you're working on transportation problems, then you will think, okay, how this maybe fit into the next couple of years, the the research direction. So because that part also will be important when you, for example, have an interview with the potential employer in future. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my side, I would agree with Ningji. Like one of the major things should be collaboration, which we generally don't do a lot as a PhD student. We have our own set of dissertation that we are working towards. Now, the challenging part is once you become a professor, you need a lot of ideas because you are working with so many students, you are writing so many grants. How would you generate these ideas? One easy way is to collaborate not just with faculty within the department, but also across colleges, across schools, right? So that even if you are not working actively, still you are learning about their fields and see how industrial engineering can be applied to those fields. So that now when you become a professor, you have some kind of ideas where you can apply these creativity and apply for grants, right? So I would say collaborating was a challenge when I was a student because you don't really have a lot of time. But if you get time, you should definitely do that. That was one of the challenge. The second challenge is also related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, this has become a big topic for a lot of universities. And as a student, I didn't have a lot of exposure to this. Now, when I become a professor, my university particularly stresses a lot on DEI. And we have to incorporate DEI in like all these three pillars of academic job, which is teaching, research, and service. So a lot of learning has to take place. I have to take a lot of courses like how to incorporate these things in my teaching, but at the same time, how to use it in my research and how to give opportunities to students coming from underrepresented areas, right? So that has also been a challenge. So as a student, I would definitely say, if you get an opportunity, take a courses on like DEI and maybe also participate in activities that will help you learn this kind of skills, inclusive and equitable skills. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would say for me, the main challenges are, it can be actually, to Puneet's point, when you start collaborating with a lot of people, both in your university and external universities, start getting a lot of ideas and you start seeing what other people in your field are doing and what areas they're publishing in. And that, for a lot of us, especially all of you in the room who are scientists and engineers, right? We're curious people. So sometimes it can be hard to rein it in and narrow your focus on a couple of specific things. And actually, Ningji kind of hit on this, but academia is a game of reputation. You want to be known for at least a couple of things, one or two significant things, whether that's a field of research, whether that's a couple of huge papers. So when you're pulled in all these directions with all these fantastic ideas, it's easy to want to kind of dip into all of them and take part in all of them. But especially early in the career as a assistant professor, you really want to kind of make your mark in a couple of places before doing all that other stuff. So I think that's one of the challenges, because I am somebody who is really curious and really interested. I'm somebody who doesn't really love working on the same thing for months and months at a time, but at the end of the day, that's what it takes to get good work out there and good work published is kind of the willingness to keep pushing forward on projects until they reach the state of publication. But at the same time, it's obviously hard to balance that when you want to work on 10 things at once. So that's the main challenge I have faced in the first kind of year and a half here. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. And you've already shared so many tips and tricks, but I want to know, is there anything you would do differently if you could go back to being a graduate student? Probably like signing up for diversity courses and collaborating more, but I'm wondering like if you have some more tips on this part.
I'll go. I have a super quick one. I think especially both master's and PhD, but I'll speak more towards PhD because that's what I did. I had the opportunity to take 16 courses after I finished my undergrad and before I could finally finish my PhD. That's how many classes I had to take. Personally speaking, I don't think I utilized those courses the best I could have. I think one thing that happened to me after my PhD was I realized kind of, oh, darn it, I'm done taking classes, right? It's hard to learn these complex topics that take a lot of time when you're working full-time as a professor and trying to teach students other subjects. So I think my point of advice is to take those difficult classes, to take those interesting classes, specifically for IEs, like classes in economics and econometrics and some of these other methodologies that we may not always use. Those are really important when you try to broaden your horizons in the research landscape. So I'll stop there. And like I said, my one recommendation is to take courses that interest you. And I'll say this about me. I took classes. I'm not pointing to anyone in the room. I took classes at times to make my life easier. I selected classes to make a semester easier or to decrease my course workload so I had more time for research or for my baby when he was eventually born. But in retrospect, those are not smart decisions. It's the best thing, I think the best thing to do is select classes that will benefit you in the long haul and not just, for instance, in one semester to reduce the time. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
For me, I definitely agree with the courses. I don't think I had a clear planning on what courses I would like to take. It was mostly on the basis of what my friends are taking and what is more popular in the department. But ideally, I would like to have a better vision of my career path and select courses based on that, even from other departments. That is something I would do differently. And the other one is paying more attention to my mental health. That is something I ignored when I was a PhD student. And I think like also doing more activities with friends would certainly help rather than just being in the lab and doing work the entire day. So.
Thank you. That was insightful.
Yeah, I agree with both. I think like the taking classes, not just from department, right? So of course the department's class is very important. It's like the laid foundation of our like the field. Also like taking classes from maybe computer science or some math departments classes, and just to like expand your horizon. And like Kyle mentioned that later when starting doing research, even though you belong to, for example, the industrial engineering departments, but actually the methodology you use might cross different areas. So, and also the other things when you start your career, actually your time is very tight. So you need to do grants, you need to balance your life, you need to teaching. But as a PhD student, you have the most flexibility to explore those areas with a long period of time. So that's something I definitely agree with that. Taking courses, even though maybe at this time you were thinking, okay, that's like not so important. I need to push my research more. The other aspects I would think is, for me, is maybe be a little bit more patient and less stressed, because I know as a PhD student, it's very stressful. You feel like it's 4-year, 5-year commitment. And I still remember before I published the first paper, I was so stressed about that because I think I spent 3 years, but there's no publication, right? But when I look back, I feel like if the academia is the career path you choose, then it's a very long career time. It's not like sports, like when you're 30, 40 years old, then it's the end of the career. But this is a very long career path. So 1-2 years is not really a lot of time in terms of the career. But if you spend those 1-2 years really increase your knowledge base or really push a very good quality of paper, that's actually deserve it. Yeah, that's like this, my thoughts about this.
Thank you all. Those were really insightful. So I realized the importance of doing good research, participating in more like collaborative stuff, and also like some club events like this one. But I want to know like what are the main skill sets you'd suggest for current students to better prepare for a job in academia?
Can you say that question again? I couldn't get the entire part.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some skill sets you'd suggest to current students to better prepare for a job in academia? You've already mentioned a few ones, but I'm wondering if there is any other skills that you would suggest.
I can just quickly put some points forward. I was in the hiring committees for the last 2 years. What I've noticed is preparing these material, right? When you're applying to jobs, it takes a lot of effort and time. And sometimes I've seen a lot of students, they cut it short, their effort and time. They don't customize it based on the university they are applying. Let's say if they are applying to an R1 university or a department can have a specific requirement, they are just submitting their general materials to all the departments and all universities. And even though their profile might be competitive, but they are losing on opportunities because they didn't really invest some extra time to customize it. So that is something I would say to realize that in advance. Maybe you might not realize that when you are just a student, but talking to people who have gone through this process, talking to your advisors and working with them. In my case, like Dr. Zhang gave me a lot of opportunities to prepare my applications. He even gave me his own template, right, that he used to prepare his job applications. And then I also had a lot of opportunities to present my job talk in front of other students within my lab, and they were like criticizing me for things that were not clear. So prepare early, maybe a year in advance, if you are really thinking of applying to academic jobs, so that you have enough time to like modify your materials based on what a university is looking for. I think that would be a good strategy.
Great.
All right. So I'll rattle off a couple. The first one, kind of piggybacking on what I was mentioning earlier with the autonomy in the job, what that comes with is a need for really good time management. Because like I said, although no one is breathing down your neck telling you what to do, there are things that need to get done. Your students need to get taught, your research needs to get done, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a work in progress, even for me. The people who were in my PhD lab when I was over there in ISE at UB probably remember a couple years ago, I did like a time management session in one of our lab meetings. And back then I used to lay out every single day and every single hour, I should say work hour. So between 8 and 5, I used to lay out every single hour what I was going to do. And this is when my classwork was over. So at the end of my PhD, I would say, okay, this hour I'm going to work on this project. Then I had meetings, blah, blah, blah. I've learned that that's not the best approach, but something in the middle is much better. And so now what I do is weekly targets. So this week I need to get this thing done. And of course, your teaching and all that stuff under the hood always needs to get done. But yeah, time management is critical. I'll end there. There's many different ways to do that, but kind of getting to a point where you're comfortable entering every week, knowing that what you need to get done in the short term and the long term will get done. I think that's very important. And it can really help, to everyone's points here, it can help to reduce the stress of the job and the mental health burden that all of us will feel at some point or another. Because what you're really doing with time management, especially in a job, like I said, 10 times now that's autonomous, is you're actually just creating expectations for yourself. And if those are reasonable expectations and you meet them, and if you're a human like me, that will make you feel good and less stressed. So that helps a lot for me. And then the second thing, and I'll say this really quickly, is conveying the importance of your research. This will help you in job talks. This will help you networking at conferences, and this will help you for the rest of your life. This is something I still see, actually, Puneet just mentioned this, but I was recently on the hiring committee for positions here. And this is something that I think a lot of folks, including myself, can keep working on, is think about applying to a job. The people on the other side of those interviews have already read your papers. They already know your work. So when you're explaining work to people, they don't want to hear your entire papers all over again. They want to hear in maybe one brief minute what the importance of that is, both to your field and to the world in general. So I'll end there. But yeah, conveying the importance of your work is hypercritical in this field.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think there's several maybe skill set. Like the one thing is like communication is very important. Like there's a so I was never in our like hire committee, but I see like the people on site, and sometimes they have good research, but sometimes their communication is a little bit lacking. So that part is also important. And the other side, like Kyle said, right? So you need to know how to present your project, like how to present the impact of your research. But on the other side, also show your show love for your like project, right? So the reason you spend so many years on a project or several projects, because you really love them. And this thing is very contagious. Like when you go on site, when you present yourself and present your project, and people can tell if you just want to finish the project or if you're really into the problem and believe this problem can lead to something new. So I think these things, when you no matter is like the Zoom interview or if you actually give a presentation somewhere, is very, very important. And I think the other thing helped me a lot is before I start job search, is have a lot of conversation with like the faculty member in our departments, like the Dr. Bada, Dr. Kawang, my advisor. So all of them will give you different opinions, like different aspects you maybe need to focus on, right? So that's actually absorbing all those, their experiences, also very important for a successful like job hunt. And I think that the other aspect, the last one real quick, is you need to, so this job is a lot of rejections. So paper might be get rejected, right? So proposal might be get rejected. Maybe you send out like 100 application, you only get 10. But you need to be resilient to those things and just learn from what you maybe can do better in the next time. And eventually you try enough and there's a good opportunities out there. Yes.
Those are all really helpful. Thank you. So our next question is, how do you view the freedom to choose research topics in academia versus industry, and what factors, what are the different natures of the both types of research? I know like some of you only have like research background in academia, but I'm sure like you have more insights to add here to our students. Thank you.
I can share an example of the type of freedom we have. In industry, you don't have freedom to select project topics. You will be forced upon a topic. For example, I was working in Dallas for this company called Otis Elevator. And the project basically was creating heuristics and algorithms to improve the waiting time of people in the elevator, which I don't care about, because what will I do by reducing the waiting time by 2 or 3 seconds? That means nothing to me. But in research, I mean, like I can focus on areas that really matters to me a lot. Like, for example, currently I've started a new research topic, which is immigration, using data science and data analytics to create fairer policies for immigrant students coming to this country in terms of getting green card or getting a job using H-1B, right? So we are creating these recommender systems using data science and data analytics. Those are the things I'll be more motivated and enthusiastic so that I can communicate the expectations well to my students. But if I'm not motivated about a project, then like I will like, oh, let's just do it for the money, but I will not get any satisfaction out of that. So academia allows me to that kind of freedom to select the topics and extract more satisfaction, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say the similar. Like I think even though like both places you do projects, right? So I have some friends there in industry. They also working on like using like operation research methods to improve like different aspects of business. But I think in academia, the difference is like mainly your interest drive where you want to do, and your interest can shift over time, right? So maybe previously I was PhD students are working on some network optimization problems. Right now, I'm more interested in like the like robust optimization, or in the future, maybe I working on some other areas. So I think interest will drive you to work on your research, and academia give you the flexibility to choosing different research topics at different stage. But I think at least as far as I know in industry, like maybe there's some times you actually have this very good match, like your interest is actually matched with the project the company provided you to do, right? But in many cases, like eventually there's a time like you feel like, okay, this is not something actually I'm interested, I'm just working for the company, right? I think that's one major difference. But of course, I know there's a people more into like industry job. I think that's totally understandable. People have different preferences and different what they want to achieve. So I think that's the different aspect. Probably we need to also ask some like from industry to tell about what they enjoy more about, like, because we are biased, right? So we choose this career path. We always think, okay, academia has the best freedom. Maybe they will share some different ideas. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on this.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and Ningji's point of bias is an important one to bring up as we all respond to all of these questions. We obviously chose this path because it's what we love, but yeah, the freedom. So my experience is I worked at a defense contractor here in Buffalo called Kubrick, right near the airport. And my experience there is basically the same as Puneet mentioned. I went to work every day, and actually I already mentioned this a few questions ago, but we literally had stand-up meetings every single morning where my manager would tell me what to do. From day to day, sometimes that was different. I was tasked to different projects, but I was told what to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way many, many careers go. But I didn't like that because I was constrained to an extent. So this is worth pointing out for everybody in the room, because I don't want to, like I said, this is biased, and I also don't want to scare anybody. But you still have some flexibility in industry. For instance, the way it went at Kubrick was I was given problem statements. I could develop solution methods to solve those problems, right? I was never told like you need to use this methodology. I was still given full autonomy in the research process after the problem was given to me. And that is the key. In my opinion, that's the key. In academia, we get to come up with the problem too, and everything after the fact. in industry, the problem is coming from the people above you, who are making sure stakeholders and shareholders and all those people are happy. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. But I will also say one last thing. I usually don't like talking about people when they're not here, but one of my very close friends, Zachary Stever, is a graduate of UB ISE Ph.D. He currently works in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he was an amazing independent researcher. And I don't just say that because he's my friend, but you can read his work and you can come to the same conclusion. He was an amazing independent researcher, but he now works somewhere where they task him, and he also loves that. And I just want to say that to kind of de-bias this maybe a little bit, but he loves his career just like we love our careers here on this call. So I just want to kind of make that known. And if you're on the fence about what career path, we have more than enough colleagues and even peers from our time at UB that we can connect you all with too. So you can get stories from everybody.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So I know one of the important points is securing grants, especially during the first few years of joining academia. But I was wondering if like that could limit your freedom on selecting these topics for your research a bit, or you were still like able to pursue your interests while getting grants on your topics.
I feel like for me, yes, so I can still balance them. And, there's a shift of like perspective about this writing grants thing. At the very beginning, I was thinking, okay, they are two different tracks, right? So one is where I get money, the other is where I do my research. But eventually I find out writing grants also give me some opportunity to talk with people not in my area. Like right now I collaborate with someone from chemical engineering. They're working on some like energy stuff, like how to recovery some rare earth material elements from like the wastewater, right? So those, I think like when you have conversation with those people from different areas and try to write a proposal together, you also can think about how your previous techniques, not exactly like the project itself, but what do you learn from optimization or like the linear programming, right? So maybe some machine learning algorithm, how those things can benefit other areas. So this can potentially be another like the research like the track, right? So besides what you do before. So I think for me, it's more like how to combine my expertise with something actually is a new application area, which it's more like it broaden my research area instead of, okay, just writing grants is just something like I try to get my money for. Yes, that's my experience. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
I'll just add quickly, I think, and probably worth it to say to the audience in the room, it also depends on if you're in a business school or an engineering school. I'll say in a business school, there's not as much pressure for me to write grants as there is in an engineering school. I can talk to anybody who wants to hear more about that offline. But that's worth mentioning because that's not something that I understood until way later in my PhD. But yeah, so that is something that should be said up front, is the kind of the pressure on funding is much different depending on where you end up in academia. But I'll also say although I am in the business school, I still am active in writing proposals. And to Ningji's point, I don't think you really have to look at them as two separate entities. I think, and this takes a lot of practice, but I think when you write proposals well, you should kind of be leaning on what you're already doing in your active research and the techniques that you utilize there. And at the end of the day, again, like I said, there's different pressures for different people, but at this point, I try to only write proposals if the ideas excite me. I think that was different in the past. I think that maybe I put my name on things because I knew I needed to write proposals. And at this point, is the project exciting? Will the funding help me or students do this project? But yeah, I'll end there and I'll let Puneet go. I know we're getting tight on time.
No, one good thing is now we have ChatGPT to help us writing these complicated proposals. That is kind of good. I mean, I don't struggle with writing proposals now because initially, being Dr. Zhang's student, we used to write a lot of proposals, but that used to take a lot of time. Like, how do you translate your ideas to something that looks good, easily communicated? But now with ChatGPT, I've gotten a good progress with grant writing. But yeah, just a side note. So you are not in the bad phase of your life. So that's good. The other thing that for me, it's a bit different what Kyle was mentioning and Ningji. I have a different setup. My university is not as research intensive as UB or other R1 universities. We invest equally into research and teaching. That means 50% research, 50% teaching. And even in terms of research, we can have our own career path. Like if you want to write a lot of grants, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to publish in good journals, you can do that. So that's why for me, writing grant is a way not just to get money, but also find a way to collaborate with faculty members from other department. Maybe we would like to have students from math department who are working on theoretical game theory or something, right? And we want to hire students from math department. So a grant could be a way to combine this, have this relationship with them, right? And it's not just about money. The other
Yeah.
thing could also be maybe buying some equipments. Maybe I need some, I am using a lot of cloud computing these days to run a lot of algorithms, and I don't have money to do that. So it's not always because I want to get millions of dollars. It's because of my needs. I need something to do my research, and that's when I will apply to a grant, right? So it depends on need to need basis. Sometimes it could be because of collaboration or hiring students, or sometimes buying equipments, or sometimes you really want to invest on a particular area of research and you need a lot of money to do that research. So for me, it has changed. It's not that I have to do it because my job doesn't force me to do it, but I will do it if I need it. So that's the change of perspective for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all very.
I just want to add something on top of that. So, so I think academia is not just like most people think James, like the academia job is like writing grants, right? So, but there's different like the directions also in academia. Like Kyle said, if you're in business school, then you don't have a lot of pressure on writing grants. And also, like if you're interested in teaching, then if you find a teaching assistant professor, I think there's no like the pressure on writing grants too. So if you specifically go to engineering school and you want to be assistant professor, then writing grants is one part of the job description, right? So it's one part where you can get money to get your like research growth. But there's actually a lot of different directions. You can try to target those places which you feel like fit you the best. Yeah.
That was a great point. Thank you. So now it's time to turn to audience and ask them both like in person and those attending online. If they have any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have an online question. I don't have a question from Kyle. I saw that you had a lot of awards in your resume, but while you were a PhD student at UB, do you have tips for applying for those and winning?
So I'm reading it now to make sure I answer everything. So applying for those, okay, that is actually interesting. I know the question is straightforward, but let me say this: apply to everything and see what sticks. That's a hard philosophy when you have a full-time job because you don't have much time to apply for everything. But in my PhD, when I had maybe a few extra minutes, I would literally apply to everything. And Puneet knows this because he did his PhD overlapped with mine in the same lab. So him and I both kind of had this philosophy, but me personally, I applied to anything and everything. And there's reasons behind that. Of course, one reason is to fill your CV. The second reason is also to fill your CV, and so is the third reason. But at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff in operations research is relatively competitive, especially when you start applying to awards outside the university. So, for instance, applying to awards at Informs or NSF. And those awards not only add something to your CV, but people externally recognize those. So, for instance, when I was on the job market, people recognized awards from Informs and asked me about those awards. They recognized things from NSF and asked me about those. So when I applied to those types of awards, I did put a lot of time and attention into it. I will say that. And by a lot of time, I mean a lot of time. I used to spend a lot of time writing letters for my applications for awards. I would spend a lot of time sending those letters to faculty in the ISE department, including Dr. Walteros, Dr. Zhang, to review those materials. So I will first say there's a huge time commitment in doing that. But like I said, and like I hope is obvious, the reason I did that was to kind of beef up my CV. And I don't know if it was worth it or not. If I didn't have those things, I don't know what would have happened. But anyways, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Any questions from the audience? Can you come here so that your voice is clear? Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, so I also have a question actually to Kyle. I think you mentioned that and during your PhD, you had like hourly goals that you set yourself, and then you decided that wasn't the best, so you decided on weekly tasks, right? I'm curious, how did that change from like you being a PhD student to now faculty? Because ultimately, I think there's some things out of your control, like maybe you can't get it to work this week. And with guidance from a professor as a PhD, I guess you have that crutch. So do you have a crutch like that as a professor, as any professor?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason for the change actually is because of what I was alluding to before. For me, I take time management so seriously for my mental health, so that to Puneet's point earlier, to ensure that I'm balancing my life. I have a wife and one child at home and another one on the way. There's many things outside of work that I need to make sure I'm getting done, just as all of you have. So from switching to the hourly kind of breakdown of for time management to the weekly, the reason for that was because when I was doing it hourly, kind of as we were bringing up, there's things that may not work in a couple hours. For instance, if you need to write some code and you only give yourself 4 hours, but it's going to take 6. If you're like me, if you don't finish in the time you gave yourself, it's going to frustrate you. So I started setting weekly goals so that doesn't happen as much. And I gave myself really attainable weekly goals. I'm not going to do it, but I could literally share my screen and show you all this right now. But what I basically do is I have a running list of all major tasks. And by major tasks, I obviously prioritize them in terms of career importance. So whether that's developing a new class or something student facing, those are always first and foremost. But then after that, it's major research papers and stuff like that. So what I will do is I have this list of major to-dos, both near and long term, and then I'll create weekly structure to ensure that I'm hitting the to-do list items that are most important or need to get done first. But anyways, yeah, that's a little bit on that. And Puneet and Ningji, I don't know what you do for time management, but it'll probably be helpful for the students to hear it because I know it's a big part of our career.
I am really bad at time management. I struggle a lot. So I generally learn from legends like Kyle and Ningji. But yeah, for me also, it's like priority based. Some things I will put a lot of importance. Some things I'll just ignore. I'll just wait for that person to come back and tell me, oh, can you do that for me? So yeah, it's mostly priority based, but I am really not great at managing time. I'm still learning.
Yeah, I think like the time management is a very like the big topic, right? So different people handle it differently. I think for me personally, I feel like it's more like for the short term, what's the main goal, right? So for example, maybe this month I wanna like to push this project. So if there's a priority, then I just like trying to do other things like in 80% of effort. You see what I mean? So because I think one difference is when I was a PhD student, I can try to do everything in a perfect fashion, right? So I can try to do my research, put all my time, energy on the research. If I do the other, like if I'm a teaching assistant this semester, I can like devote a lot of time in there trying to make class good. But right now, as a faculty member, there's so many things and you never have enough time. You still need to balance your life. So I think for my trick is just think about what's most important for you and just work the perfect, make all your energy on that thing and make other things like 70%, 80%. And they're going to solve themselves, those problems. And eventually in the next month, maybe you have different goal, then like just put most efforts on that. So I think there's a different, but that's my way of like time management. Yes.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone has. Okay, if not, I'd like to thank you again for your time and giving us so much input into jobs in academia. I have one short question from Dr. Hunt about perspectives at business schools, like from the standpoint of someone who is coming from engineering. How was that for you to first apply for business school? Were the application process any different, or now that you have secured a position there, is it very different from what one might expect in engineering?
Yeah, so yes, it is. And I'll start first with expectation for engineering versus business school, at least when I was applying for the two. And actually it'd probably be even easier to give you kind of an outlook on like what's expected for tenure. So as mentioned previously, in engineering schools, what's needed for tenure is a whole bunch of funding and a lot of good research output in terms of publications. What is needed in business schools is you don't necessarily even need, you can have $0 in funding when you go out for tenure, as long as you have, let me just say like this, 5+ publications in A journals. And like literally what we have here in our business school and all of the major business schools in the US is we have a target list of journals. And so that's completely different than engineering. I'll keep it short and I'll keep it at that. That is a completely different philosophy than engineering right away, which means when you go to apply for positions in business schools, you need to cater your CV to that. For instance, I had many papers from my PhD that business schools just, I don't want to say don't care about. That's not true, because they actually do care about them, but they don't care as much about them. For instance, if you have 10 papers in some journals that are not on their list, and then if another candidate comes up for a job and has only one paper on their list, they're going to take that person more seriously. And there's many reasons behind this. I won't get into the weeds on that right now. But that's really the way that business schools go. It's really research driven. And then it's really publication driven in terms of the outlets where you publish. And then the other huge, I don't want to say difference, because everybody who I've interfaced with in engineering, they are fantastic teachers and they take teaching extremely seriously. But in terms of tenure and how we are reviewed, let me put it that way, they put a lot of weight on our teaching. And we teach more than engineering professors do, which is also worth noting. I don't know what, actually, I don't mind telling you all this. So my load right now as a junior faculty is 3 classes a year. When I make, hopefully, if I get tenure, then it will increase to 4. Ningji, I don't know if you want to mention yours right now, but I think it's much less than that.
Yeah, so for us, it's right now is 1+1, and we get a tenure. So it depends if you like the research focus, then probably it's 1+1 or 1+2. But like still very many university, even in the industrial engineering, is a little bit different. Like some of them starting with 1+2. But I think for assistant professor, 1+2 is the most for engineering school a year. Yes.
Yeah, so just based on that, you can see that in engineering, typically at most major R1 universities, you'll be teaching less in engineering and expected to do more research and funding, for instance, grant writing. Whereas in business school, you'll be teaching a little bit more, and the research pressure comes in where you are publishing, like I said. And if you get funding, those are all really nice kind of stars to put on your CV, but there's no immediate pressure. I hope that answered your question. I realize we're running super late or super
Yeah, that
low
was
on time.
great. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
sorry. I just remembered that, and I wanted to just quickly add that. Thank you all for joining today for our panel. Just quickly, I want to say that as Informs Club president, I want to encourage you to scan the QR code and be in touch with us for our future events. We are going to hold more workshops and some competitions, and of course, many more to come. There's also a feedback link on the QR code. Give us feedback. That's how we can make these better. And this is from the SRA Club. Please also scan their QR code and be in touch with both of us. Hopefully we can provide you better events in the future. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, Dr. Wei, and Dr. Hunt for joining us today. I hope we can have you in person here someday soon.
Thank you so much for organizing all this.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me here.
Great time.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great having you. Take care. Have a good day.